Hey guys, what is happening and welcome to this video. So in today's video we are talking about the big prediction which everybody's been waiting for, nobody's listening to, and it's like 2008 all over again. But the difference is this time it's going to affect economies with the biggest amount of debt, and Canada is right up there. So without further ado guys, let's do this. Alright guys, I'm back. So yes, we're talking about the big prediction. Who is predicting it? Well, of course it's Micheal Burry. Micheal Burry has come out with a prediction. He came out with it a couple of weeks ago or a month ago I think. But anyway, he's came out with this prediction, which is inflation is going to be like the Weimar Republic when hyperinflation happened in Germany. And this is something quite worrying, because when I read Micheal Burry and what he was predicting, I then looked at the German Weimar Republic and what happened there. And you should really look that up because it's such a similar narrative to what we're in right now. And it's similar in the sense that the crisis we're in right now is very similar to what happened back then. What happened back then is it was strikes and the country was heavily indebted from the war, repatriation payments to places like the US and the UK. And the thing is, they were so in debt from that, and the strikes were dragging on the economy and supply chains were screwed up, that they started printing money to solve that problem. Well, what happened is you had inflation slowly creeping in, exactly like it is right now. It's slowly creeping in, but you didn't have them doing anything. And look at what the Federal Reserve is doing, because they're going to be the lead on this. People don't realize that the Federal Reserve is the most important central bank for this crisis, and they are not slowing their asset purchases. I watched the Fed just yesterday and he basically said these words. He said, once inflation meets our 2% target, that's when we're going to start to weigh up doing things. And before that, earlier, he said inflation is running well above 2%, but they believe it to be transitory. They just believe it to be transitory, and they're trying to use all these fancy forecasting models to say that it's transitory. But let's be honest guys, we know that a lot of these price increases are not going to be transitory. And the reason is because if you look at supply chains, they ain't getting fixed anytime soon. The only way you're going to stop inflation is by stopping people spending money. Now think about cars. Let's take cars for an example. Everybody knows cars, right? Well, cars, if you think about it, the prices are rising because there's too much demand and there's too little supply. And that's basically what happens when you have supply and demand and one is out of whack with the other. Now, I believe the auto thing will be more of a transitory nature. I hate that word, transitory. The thing is, let's use it as an example because most people are going to understand this, okay? So let's say you've got lots of people who want to buy cars right now, and that is happening whether you're in the UK, the US, Canada. All these things are happening globally, and there's a reason for that, because all the central banks have been printing money like crazy, have increased the money supply unbelievably. And when you think about it then, okay, you've got a lot of people chasing little products so the prices go up. Well, how do you stop people doing that? Well, you've got to stop people spending the money, and the only way you're going to stop people spending the money is by increasing interest rates, and that will happen eventually. And that is what Micheal Burry's predicting. Not only has he said the housing market is exactly like it was back in 2008, where you've had all these dodgy mortgage securities, and there is loads of them, especially on the corporate side now. To say this thing is 10 times bigger than the 2008 crisis is an understatement. In the 2008 crisis hit America the worst. This is going to hit the most indebted nations the worst, the most indebted consumers the worst. And when people are talking about a great reset and people are thinking this is going to be something. Let me tell you what I think of that. In fact, I'm going to tell you about that in a different video, but it's worth listening to because this is exactly what some big heads have predicted in investments, and that's because they know that's going to happen because that's what they exactly plan to do. So basically, Burry is predicting that yields are going to spike. So he's been shorting the mortgage bonds, and that means if the yields spike, then that means he's a winner. And that's probably going to happen in the near-term future because inflation is rising, supply chains are getting more affected. It's like I said about clothes and shoes, and there's all kinds of products that are being affected by this. And not only that, you've got trade disputes with the US and China. You've got China and Russia trying to kill the petrodollar. They're trying to not trade in US dollars. And if the US dollar loses its reserve status, then believe me, that is going to affect all the Western countries that rely on that US dollar, and that will be a disaster. And it could happen because the US and Russia's relations are not good, and neither are the US and China's relations. And we just saw Russia doing a deal with the Saudis. Why is that? The Saudis, the only reason they agreed to participate in the petrodollar was because they wanted protection from all the Western countries, and that's why most of the Western countries sell the Saudis all the weapons, and then they sell them to whoever the highest bidder. They don't really care. And that's why indirectly all the Western countries have been funding all these terrorist organizations and all these wars which are happening in places like Africa. And you look and, oh, they've got an M4, which is a US made gun, and that's exactly how it's happening. But anyway, I'm going off on a slight tangent there. Burry is predicting those yields are going to spike, which is going to lead to higher interest rates. It doesn't even matter whether the Federal Reserve changes the funds rate or the Bank of Canada changes the funds rate. If the yields spike, then that means that your interest rates are going to be going up. And we are going to see that. But not only that, we're going to see those yields spiking to 4 or 5%. Burry is thinking that they are going to spike massively. Because what's going to happen is eventually places are going to start to raise the interest rate or raise their guidance on it, because they're going to start to worry that this isn't transitory. And it's going to make the Fed look like an idiot. And when that happens, when they raise their guidance, the yields are going to spike. But when they eventually change the interest rate, the funny thing is that is probably going to happen, you're going to see this, is it's not going to do anything. And that is going to be the scary thing for these central banks. That's going to be when they finally wake up. And that's going to be when people realize that these central banks do not work for the people, they work for the banking system. And that's when you're going to see real change right there, because that's when you're going to see them, you know, doing interest rate hikes every quarter. And if that's still not affecting it, then it's going to be a really big problem. And I don't think a lot of people think like that. I mean, to say we're on a knife's edge is an understatement, but you see people, and this is the funny thing, which Burry always talks about. Burry always says people are not listening. Burry always said this, and he said this back in 2008, like people were laughing at him, nobody was listening to him, and here he was predicting the next collapse. Burry is very different to a lot of normal people because he has no emotional attachment. He is able to view things with literally no emotion, just plain as they are, and he sees things that people do not see. And he's a heavily analytical guy, an incredibly smart guy. And when this happens, it's going to be bad. Like, people think that it's going to be, hey, this is going to be the time that I'm going to be able to buy a house. And it's really not going to be as simple as that, because banks are going to be requiring like 20% down payments, and there's going to be all kinds of things, and then the interest rates are going to be high on top of that. So what people can qualify for is going to be smaller, and there's going to be a credit crunch. And what does the Great Reset mean? Well, we're going to talk about that in the next video, so if you're interested in that. But anyway, this is what Burry is predicting, and honestly I believe him, because when you look back at the history of the Weimar Republic and what happened and what they did, it's incredibly similar to the situation we've had here, where COVID has shut down large parts of the economy, and then they've had to print money to prop it up, and that's exactly what happened during the Weimar Republic. Countries are just so much in debt. It's similar to the Weimar Republic, which was in so much debt because of the repatriation payments. Well, economies are just in so much debt right now. Consumers are in so much debt. Everybody is in so much debt, and it is a massive debt bubble. So the thing is, you just have to be smart. All the sheep right now are buying, they're buying cars, they're buying homes, and the sheep always do this, and they think nothing is going to happen. They are not prepared in any such way, and you can be prepared. You can be prepared, and I'm not a financial advisor, but you can be prepared by buying silver and gold, which are safe haven assets in an inflationary environment, which is what we always have, let's face it, because when has inflation been negative over the past 10 years? Have a look at a chart. So gold and silver are an asset that you can own. If you can't own a home, at least put a portion of your savings in gold and silver instead of in toilet paper money. But anyway guys, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a guy who does videos in a C-train parking lot early in the morning, and nobody knows why. But anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Burry's making big bold predictions and people don't like it. Nobody is listening to him. We are back in that time in The Big Short where Steve Eisman says everybody is walking around like nothing's happening. Everybody is walking around like nothing's happening, and it's all just about to explode. But anyway guys, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel if you're interested in seeing the Great Reset video, which I'm going to do next. So anyway guys, without further ado, I will see you in the next video. Peace and love as always. Take care. Bye.